Hello everyone and welcome to our research methods class and our week 6. So this is our virtual classroom for week 6. So let's get started here and go through our week 6 resources here. So this week we're talking about surveys, which is one of my favorite topics. Now I use Qualtrics as my survey medium, but you can also use SurveyMonkey and you can use all types. So we are reading chapter 8, which I'm going to download this PowerPoint and start with that. And then we will go into some of the assignments. So let's see if I can open this here and get to that. There we go. Awesome. So let's start here. So basically what I'm going to do is go through the PowerPoint, and then there's several questions in the PowerPoint, and that is your assignment. So please be sure to watch till the end and go ahead and answer the questions that are prompted as part of this assignment. So we talk about surveys, and so here we have a little dialogue. Hi, Brianna. Hey, been to a Maroon 5 concert lately? Yes, in Toronto last year. How did it go? Worth the ticket price and the drive? So people often ask their friends about concerts, movie, cars, restaurants, sporting events, and many other topics. And these are informational interviews, right? Where you are trying, as the person asking the questions, to see, gather some information, gather some data to see and make a determination for yourself. As in this case, you may want to go ahead and attend a Maroon 5 concert. So hence you're asking how expensive the ticket price is. Obviously it's in Toronto, so how far they have to drive. So keep in mind informational interviews. Now, a personal interview is also one of the main tools that we utilize as researchers to collect data, and we do that through a survey. So a survey is a tool for gathering data where you are posing questions to many people. And as I mentioned at the onset of this, we have Qualtrics, we have SurveyMonkey, we have several ways in which we can gather this survey data. Microsoft Forms is another one. I prefer Qualtrics because it does allow more robust reporting, and then you can also track participants. That doesn't mean that these features are not also available in the other survey tools, but that's just the one that I am most familiar with. Then we have a structured interview. This is a bit more formal interview, and it is like a questionnaire that is administered by the interviewer. There's very little or no probing for additional information, and typically the response categories are provided by the interviewer. So instead of giving them a survey and allowing the participants or the respondents to respond on a Likert scale, then in this case, the interviewer is actually giving you the questions and then jotting your responses. So I would say for convenience, most of the surveys that a lot of researchers conduct as part of their qualitative studies is usually via email. And one of the key areas is you get consent, or you tell the person that's potentially going to complete the survey that, you know, the intent of the study and get their consent to move forward. And typically you have to click like a yes, you agree, and then you get into the survey questions. Another very useful tool to give those participants is to make sure that you're telling them how long the survey takes. I know from my perspective, if they say it takes an hour, I'm probably not going to do it. But if it says 10 to 15 minutes, that seems to be the time slot that most people are willing to complete a survey. So here is an example of a structured interview. So it's an open adoption of infants and adoptive parents' feelings 7 years later. And that is a study done by Siegel in 2003. So open adoptions in the Siegel study were defined as those that the birth and adoptive parents had some sort of personal contact and exchange of information about themselves before or after the adoption finalization, or both. So the sample consisted of the first 21 families who responded to our invitation within 6 months and who met the criteria for inclusion in an interview. 7 years later, attempts were made by mail and phone to reconnect the 21 original families. 16 of those families, which is 76% of the original sample, made up the sample at the time. So the first part of your assignment is to locate this study. So submit this document, The Open Adoption of Infants, Adoptive Parents' Feelings, 7 years later by Siegel. Locate that study and include that as part of your assignment submission for this virtual classroom this week. So again, locate this study up here by Siegel in 2003. You can do a search via Google Documents or Google Scholar. You can do a search in the library, and if you can't locate the document, you can put a link to it. So say do not pay for it as a PDF, but you can actually put the link in your submission for our virtual classroom. This is where the study is located if it is not an open source or a study that you can find. And so we can do that. We'll do that at the end of this video to hopefully show you how to go about doing that. So now let's continue with our structured interview about this study. So the parents were sent an informed consent form describing the purpose of the follow-up interview and promising confidentiality. This is very typical, right? We always have any type of interview, any type of survey, any type of study that we're doing. The Institutional Review Board, IRB, requires us to do this information. So we want to give an informed consent form. We want to get that the participants, yes, they agree to participate, and we always want to ensure confidentiality. And how we do that is we typically take, in this case, these interviewers, instead of putting their names, we would put numbers, and we would aggregate the data so that not one person's information is singled out. So the parents were interviewed in their homes. In all but one case, both parents participated as a couple in the interview. And the interview included 29 questions designed to determine what, if anything, was open about the adoptions at the time of the adoption, how the openness has changed over time, if at all, and how the parents felt about the openness in their adoptions now that children were of school age. And the interviews lasted from 1.5 to 2.5 hours. And continuing with the same study, we see here that the researcher Siegel found that the disastrous outcomes some opponents of open adoption had predicted did not emerge. After 7 years of successful experience, many parents were more enthusiastic about open adoption than initially. So what are the advantages of personal interviews for this study? Again, this is another part of your assignment. So the first part, we mentioned that you were going to locate the Siegel study, and if you couldn't find it, you were at least going to provide a URL or a location and a website where you were able to locate it. And now the next part of the assignment is, what are the advantages of personal interviews for this study? What are the limitations of the personal interview for this study? Again, two other parts of your assignment. And then you want to compare personal interviews to telephone interviews and to questionnaires or surveys. So these 3 questions, in addition to your location of the Siegel study, are so far part of your assignments. So typically the advantages of personal interviews is that you can see other cues. So you can see body language, you can see tone and inflection, you see how the parents interact together. Limitations are it could be biased based on just that one interviewer. And also if you can't record them, since they were done in the location, all but one were done in the homes of the parents, you may not be able to take advantage of all of those cues if it wasn't able to be recorded. So personal interviews, usually the interviewer goes to the location, or they meet at some at some location, and then you interact with one another. You're able to do follow-up questions, you're able to ask for more clarity, and you can possibly do the same thing in a telephone interview. The limitation of a telephone interview is you don't see the person as you did in a personal interview, but you still have the advantage of the tone, the inflection, and the words that they're saying. Whereas if you are conducting a survey or a questionnaire, you're just getting data back based on what they answered on the Likert scale. And typically in business, we like a 5-point Likert scale, but I have seen a 7-point Likert scale utilized as well. And that's where you're answering like 1 through 5 or 1 through 7, strongly agree or strongly disagree. So these are some of the examples of how you can answer these 3 questions as part of your assignment for the virtual classroom number 6. And also make sure you include the URL or the article for the Siegel study, because that will help you in answering these questions. Now we are taking an online survey on a mobile phone, right? So we have web, email, internet, and online surveys. And these are probably the most common types, I believe. I know in all of the research that I've conducted, I mean, interviews are probably provide a wealth of information, but the web, email, and internet and online services gives you such ease and convenience in conducting your survey. So your web, internet, and online surveys have become a much enhanced version of the email survey, with options where you can add video and audio and graphics and color and animation. I know one of my colleagues in marketing, she would provide images of different advertisements and try to get consumers to respond to those images of the advertisement. She also provided a snippet of a commercial to get feedback from a focus group as to if they like the commercial or not. So those are just examples of how we use video and audio and graphics in surveys to enhance what we're doing. So responses can be recorded and tallied electronically, and this procedure reduces significantly the risks of any type of inaccuracies that can occur when data is transferred from a pen and paper format or a survey instrument. And we can put this in data analytics programs, and we can create infographics and visualizations from the data, and we can take the data and move it towards, like statistical software like SPSS and try to analyze it through regression analysis. So this electronic format eliminates errors and inaccuracies and hopefully provides us with a better opportunity to analyzing the data. So we're going to just have a summary that describes the research on a timely topic. So the following summary describes research on a timely topic that obtained data using an online service. Notice how potential respondents were recruited and directed to the online service, how they provided consent for their participation, and how the survey was administered. So again, when we're going to show you a summary of this timely topic, and what you want to keep in mind is how they were recruited, how they were directed to the survey, how they provided consent, and how the survey was administered. So keep in mind those 4 topics. Cyberbullying, depression, and problem alcohol use in female college students. So this is another survey that I am asking you as part of our assignment to locate as part of your assignment, and make sure if the article is not free or you can't find it, provide a URL where there might be part of the database that you can find. And this was a 2015 study. So young women aged 18 to 25 were recruited from 4 colleges by distributing flyers in several undergraduate introductory courses. Flyers contained a link to an online survey, and upon reaching the link to the survey, students were provided with information about the study and asked to provide consent. And then students who received flyers received reminder emails to complete the survey from course instructors. All participants were provided with a $5 Starbucks gift card. So here we see, let's go back to this. Here we see the recruitment, right, through flyers or potentially as well through emails to complete their survey from course instructors. So 2 ways in which they were recruited. And then once they did click on the link, they would get to the online survey. They were asked to provide consent. And then the incentive for them to complete the survey was that $5 gift card if you did participate. So the female college students were asked, have you ever witnessed, experienced, or participated in cyberbullying in college? And participants who answered yes or don't know were then asked, what experiences do you have with cyberbullying? Check all that apply, where they were given 11 specific examples of cyberbullying behaviors as of their list. And Selke in the report that being involved with cyberbullying, whether as a recipient or the bully, was associated with increased risk of depression. In addition, those who were the bully showed a greater risk of problem alcohol use compared to those with no cyberbullying activities. So this is an interesting finding. Whether you were the recipient or the bully, you had higher risk of depreciation. And then if you were the bully, you also showed a greater risk of alcohol use than if you didn't have any cyberbullying, you did not show that. So briefly discuss the use of the internet as a mode of survey data collection. So again, this is another question that would be part of your assignment to discuss the use of the internet as a mode of survey data collection. And how might the respondents in this study be affected by an online survey or not? So these are, let me go back to that. So these are 2 questions to add as part of your assignment. You're going to discuss the internet as a mode of survey data collection. So for example, in this particular Selke et al. In study, we see that they used the internet, right? Basically, they gave them the link and they gave it through flyers, or course instructors gave them an email to their students to complete this. And how, typically we see that respondents, if they're in an online survey and they feel that they are being anonymous and that they are not really being singled out, they are more likely to state that they were the bully, or they might not feel ashamed to state that yes, they were the recipient of cyberbullying. So typically the anonymity provided with online tools or an online survey through email or through just links, it might give you, as the researcher, the ability to look into this information a little bit more in depth. But the problem is then you can't ask those follow-up questions. But as we see here, if they answered yes or don't know, then they did get a follow-up question that you can build in these situational trees when you are creating the survey. But you just, you'd have to think of all the scenarios ahead of time. Whereas you were doing a personal interview, they might come out. And then you might also have the experience of having these raw emotions as well. So now let's talk about another study. Children's Behavior Problems in the United States and Great Britain by Parcel et al. 2012. So again, as part of your assignment, you may want to locate this study or use the URL or provide some links so that I know that you've actually made an attempt to try to find all 3 of these studies so far. So in this study, we have a sociologist, James Coleman, proposed a theory that suggests that the primary reason for differences in children's behavioral problems varies by level of families' social capital, such as the time and effort that parents spend on children in the home environment. So Parcel et al. Argues that if physical health is a strong determinant of behavior problems in the US than in Great Britain, their findings would suggest that the more developed welfare state of Great Britain may be partially substituting for parental inputs. so that ill physical health is not as consequential for British compared with American children. So here what the researchers are trying to state is that physical health is a strong determinant of behavioral problems, more in the US than in Great Britain. So children's behavioral problems in the United States and Great Britain, we're going to continue our study, our discussion of this study. And so Parcel et al. Uses data now from 2 surveys to analyze the effects of family social capital on child behavior problems within the 2 nations, Great Britain and the United States in this case. So their main findings support the theory. In both societies, male children, those with health problems and those whose mothers are divorced, are at an increased risk for behavioral problems, while those with stronger home environments are at a reduced risk. So here what they found is that both in Great Britain and both in the United States, more male children that had health problems, that their mothers are divorced, have a higher risk of behavioral problems. Whereas those children that were from a stronger home environment did not have a higher risk of those behavioral problems. So what this study illustrates are those close connections between the theory that they're proposing and the survey research that they gathered from their respondents. So continuing, we have a summary of what we've learned so far. So a survey is a method for collecting information about people by directly asking them questions. And when you conduct a survey, it's relatively easy. You're getting high quality data from a survey is not easy. So conducting the survey is pretty easy, but getting that high quality data from the survey is not as easy as it looks, right? You have to select questions with care and questions that are composed to ensure accurate and complete responses. So, you have to make sure that you have another aspect known as content validity within the survey to ensure that the questions that you're asking are content valid, meaning that you're able to get the data that you're trying to test. Typically, when we complete a survey, we are trying to gather primary data for a particular hypothesis. So the questionnaire, particularly mail and internet forms, must be laid out in an attractive format. Again, some of the considerations when you're devising a survey is to use other surveys, right? So you can compile questions from various surveys through various studies, and several questions have changed over time. So for example, gender used to just be male, female, and I do not wish to disclose, and now we have several other characteristics of gender that you would want to incorporate to be sensitive to those groups. So the chapter also gives us guidelines for writing and formatting a questionnaire. And that is probably one of the most difficult areas to understand, because when you're trying to devise a questionnaire, you don't want all of the questions to be strongly agreed, but you do want to pose questions in the negative state to show that the actual respondent is providing the same answer for both questions. Proofread everything more than once, and pre-testing the survey is a must. And follow-ups in survey research are essential. So you definitely do not want to have a survey instrument that has misspellings, because that would hinder your content validity, and it would also hinder the way that your respondents look at you as a researcher. So professional editing services are often utilized when devising a survey. So I know in my experience as conducting surveys, I would go to the writing center at my university to make sure that it was made sense. And then pre-testing the survey, I would give the survey to a small group of people that are not going to be the final respondents to get their feedback. Does this question make sense? How did they answer the question? Because sometimes as the researcher, you don't know if the question, you may think that the answer is this way, or you may think that you're asking this question to gather a particular variable, but then if you have several respondents that think otherwise, that is not a valid survey instrument. And so let's go back and just review your assignment here. So I want to go back. Let me stop this and go back to the beginning to review the assignment for this particular chapter for our item here. So this is just describing, we describe personal interview and structured interviews. Let me make this bigger so I am not blinding anyone. So the first study that you're going to try to gather is this open adoption of infants, adoptive parents' feelings 7 years later, Siegel. And let me see if you could just highlight this and let's see if it lets me copy it in our Google here. I would recommend Google Scholar to try to find these. So Google Scholar, oh, hold on. I don't know why it does this. Every time I try to go into here, it does this. Let's see. All right, I don't know why it's not letting me do this, but I would go to Google Scholar and see if you can look at that. And still going, but it's not letting me move to other areas. So every time I do this, this is not as, let me see. Let's see. All right, here's Google Scholar. So if we click on that and let's paste that study and see, here we go. So then it comes right up. And then if you click on that, then you see here, it's through ProQuest and you see the journal. And so you don't, if you don't have access to the article, all you have to do is provide this link. But if you go through CAU's library and we do have access to this particular journal, then we'll do that. But if not, all you have to do is do exactly what I did. Go into Google Scholar, type in the type in the title of the study, and you should get it here. And then look at it. And let me see if we click on this DOI. It's a document object identifier. It gives you the abstract. And then you do not want to pay for it, but none of that. But you at least would put this particular URL to the study so it shows that you've actually looked at it. So that's what I would recommend for our assignment. So this is the first study that you're going to gather, and then we went through all of these, and these are the 3 questions that you're going to answer for the first study. What are the advantages of personal interviews for the study? What are the limitations of personal interviews for the studies? And then you're going to compare the personal interviews to telephone interviews and to questionnaires or survey. So that's the first order of business for this first study. Then we have, we go through that. Then we have our second study, which is our cyberbullying, depression, and problem alcohol use in female class students. So let's actually see if we can gather that this time. Let's see if we go back in here, and maybe it'll let me do that. Let's see if I click on Google Scholar and see if that one pops up. Same thing, really nicely here. So Google Scholar is the way I would recommend, and if you click on it, you see it brings it to here, and then this is all you have to do is just put this URL in your assignment, and that's it. And then so at least it shows that you've tried to locate the article. And then let's see here if it will let us view it in a PDF. And it asks for access. So if you do not pay for it, just put the URL in, or if we have it in our library, that would be great. But if not, no worries. You can just put the URL and then you go through that. And then in this particular study, you're going to answer these 2 questions: to briefly discuss the use of the internet as a mode of survey data collection, and how might respondents in the study be affected if it's an online survey or not. So for our second study on the cyberbullying, here you're going to answer those 2 questions. So you're cyberbullying and you're answering those 2 questions. So the third study is about children's behavior in Great Britain. So let's go back and see if that would be, if we just click back to our Google Scholar here and add that and see what comes up. And here we have it as well. So it looks like, yes, it's here. And this is through Sage Publications. So we're going to click here And here we have it. And so then all you're going to do is here you have, and this one looks like the study is available here. So this is great. It's an open pub. So and if you click download, here you see all of the information and all of the studies. So this might help you a little bit better. And I think if we click download PDF, it should open for us here. So this study is an open study and you see it here. And so you should be able to access this. So you can put this exact URL in your assignment for this last piece here. So this one is a little bit easier to get and it's an open access one. So there you have it. And then basically you would just show that here because there's no questions for this one. And then you see here some tips on that. So hopefully that helps you go through our chapter for this week and on surveys. And I hope you enjoyed this video. And don't forget to include all of these aspects of the assignment within our virtual classroom for this week. Thanks for watching.